Hello, digital card fighters. This is Kyle D from Ride My Avatar, bringing you what I've been testing and everything like that, and I have a good grasp on, just because I've been playing the decks, and this isn't like normal tier list where I did the research or anything like that. I've play tested, and this is my opinion on what decks are pretty much not so broken and very much the weakest of the links. So today's zero tier list, I'm going to go over all these lucky cards. So each one I'll explain a little bit, and I know this is content grabbing because that's what people say this is, but this is based on my opinion and what I think is really good decks. So we're gonna go off, and this is our first deck. This deck is representing all the mixture of Nova, so the mixture of Azure Dragon, the Trinity 3. I think it's a great deck, don't get me wrong. I think it's a high tier 2 deck, but it is not tier 1. Even with the Azure Dragon line and good stuff, Nova is really good. It just falls short in my opinion in some areas that just could be a lot better. So the next deck I'm going to talk about is Great Nature. As you can see, we have the Platypus. I see the deck as a strong contender. Like, I see it as, right now, I'm going to call it tier 3, because the fact that the tier 1 slots and everything like that push so much, and you're heavily reliant on certain pieces to be able to restand, like the Kangaroo, and that's an on-hit. Like, a lot of on-hits, kind of hit or miss, especially for restanding, everything like that. So you want to be able to play around that. But the problem with that kind of mentality is that even with Leopold and Lux can steal you games, but at the end of the day, the consistency of the deck still falls short now because of the fact that we're in Zero and not the IRL game. So where the card's retiring and coming to your hand, you have shield value and everything like that. You don't have any of this value. All you're doing is sometimes just trying to grab and come forth with the deck. So that's where I'm thinking like high tier 3, but like probably end of tier 2. So it's not like it's a bad deck. I think it can hold its own, but it does have its issues where it needs the better support that comes in 2 sets, where it'll finally push itself up here. Like maybe up here, bottom here. You know what I mean? But for right now, I think it's a tier 3 deck. I played it. It has its strong moments, and it can be explosive, but it just sometimes doesn't have enough power to finish if it doesn't get to Lux. So, next I'm going to talk about the Angel Feather variants. So, you have Egodial, Kaias, and Severa, or Shava. I don't know. The 3 kind of variants that are focused around each one, and they're all their personal builds. But I think it's a really good strong deck, and it makes itself into the tier 2 category because of its power level. It has a lot of strength of being able to recycle damage, move PGs to hand when especially facing MLB, and being able to heal damage, like if I showed you in some of my videos, that it has the ability to manipulate the damage zone and be able to heal. And with a deck of sometimes 9 heals, you can definitely get there. But the problem comes down to it's still reliant on having PGs in hand once MLB starts swinging, or other decks that just can outgrind it or take it head on. You know what I mean? So that's where it comes down to with that, and that's where I think it sits in a tier 2 slot. So the next deck I'm going to talk about is Vermillion Dungaree. So Vermillion is so powerful because of the fact that it has not just 4 chances to have blockade, it has 8 blockades basically in its deck as mini blockades. So having a grade 1 and a grade 2 that be able to shut off, and then having a Vanguard like Vermillion who can swing attacks, really brings a different mentality to the game, where now you don't have to worry about this and this. You can definitely pull through really well. So that's where I think it sits in the number 1 in tier 1 slot. So we're gonna go and talk about the next deck, and that's Good Stuff Kagero. So, you know, either running waterfalls and blockades, or just focusing around blockade, but you don't really run the end as your main focal, I think it's still super strong. It is very powerful, but it's definitely a tier 2 deck. Like, it's not as consistent as, let's say, the end, where the end can draw extra cards and it kind of gets more PGs that way. Waterfall can actually hit the numbers, especially getting over MLB or any of the cross ride numbers. It helps. So it's definitely pretty strong, and I think it definitely inches above the Ashura, the good stuff Novas. So that's where I'm going to put it for right now. So let's go into, this is Garmoire MLB. So with this combination, we kind of know that Garmoire MLB is useful and quite powerful, but it's still clunky because you have two engines that just clash with themselves sometimes, because either you're discarding to call the grade 1 or anything like that, and sometimes you just don't need that, especially with how much our format is shifting to retire heavy or slash negate heavy. So right now I think it's a good tier 1 slot, but it's not, it's probably going to be like at the end of our tier 1. So next one I want to talk about is Tsukuyomi. Tsukuyomi is really good, even if it's stand or crit version. So the thing about Tsukuyomi is she's very consistent, and she, if you can read the stack and know what you're doing, you can do a lot of damage with her. She is very powerful, but the problem comes down to is if you don't know what you're doing with her, you can definitely hurt yourself more than actually benefit yourself. So I'm going to put her here for right now. She is a tier 1 deck, but I think she's fighting Garmoire right now to be either first or last, like second to last or last in the slot, because she's definitely tier 1.5-ish. Like these two decks here are like tier 1.5. But again, the thing with OTT is that they can steal wins because of just Silent Tom. Because shutting off one of the major defensive lines, if you have 3 PGs in him, Tom just looks at you and goes like, bye, you're done. Heal or die. So that's the big thing about Tsukuyomi, is being able to have the running, the stands, and everything like that. Next deck I'm going to talk about is Pale Moon. Pale Moon is really good, in my opinion. I wish I could put her in tier 2, but the sad truth is Pale Moon right now doesn't have the strength it needs to push itself above and beyond what it can do. So with that, I think she's a solid tier 3, just because of the issues it has with clashing right now. Is that it can hit the numbers, but 3 attacks, and then when they start clearing your board and MLB's crit pressure, it just sometimes is not enough to be able to handle it itself. And that's where the big issue it draws in, and it can hit the numbers, but it just can't consistently, because the number requirement to hit is sometimes related to actually having to have a grade 3 in front row. And unlike before where it didn't matter as much because MLB could you didn't have to face MLB and those numbers mattered and you could wreck. Now it's tougher because even multi-attacking isn't enough because of the cross rides and everything like that. So it gets pushed down further from, I would have normally had it in tier 2 slot, but I think it's just a tier 3. Next, I want to bring in, basically Grand Blue just happened, and this deck is incredibly strong. It's consistent. It can get grade 2s on board, but its biggest issue still lies on the fact that you are literally only gaining 5k for a limit break. Every other deck kind of gains way more crazier stuff with their limit break than anybody else, but I think it's a good tier 2 deck. I think it pushes like it's 4th. I think it's a good spot to keep it at 4. Just because where it can do everything like that, it's super strong. Next, let's talk about the big elephant, the newcomer in the room, is our Iselle. Iselle is, Crit Iselle, very good. If it goes off, and I mean if it goes off, the deck can be explosive, and as long as all the stars align, this deck is very explosive. So I do say it's probably the higher end of the tier 1 slot. But again, every other deck kind of just outpaces it sometimes. And you can have this issue where you're dragging into this bad spot. And I don't like when a deck hits that kind of thing. Like, you can hit the crits all you want, but if your opponent has the PGs to stop you, everything like that, variants can change that. But again, you're still relying on the calls, and if your opponent, you're facing a retire heavy deck that just can keep removing a rear guard, you're still taking 2 to 3 attacks, 2 to possibly 3 attacks a turn. So that's where it kind of gets really tough to make calls on that. So I think Iselle is kind of up there, like in the top, like near the closer to the big 3 than anything else. So let's talk about one of the better of the clan boosters that we get, and that's Neo Nectar. So I personally love Neo Nectar. I would love to put it in S tier, but I know for a fact it is nowhere near that. It is definitely a tier 2 deck, and I will admit that. Again, everybody else kind of has gimmicks that are a little more stronger, and having Trail and Rose, a lot of their abilities be on hits. A lot of people don't know what it does. That's why it can get away with a lot of its stuff it can do. But I do think it is a little bit better than most, so I'm going to put it here. I think it sits here, and it's going to stay there. So next I want to talk about MLB. MLB, boom, done. Deck is completely tier 0. The deck can be beat. There is no way around that. You can beat that deck. But its win-loss rate percentage is ridiculous. I think it's got a good 90% chance of winning every game just because it can PG check early enough, and it has Gancelot being able to grab a pretty much retire card out of everybody else that has like abilities like Dark Irregulars that has the ability to grab a card to substitute, put the heal back. They gain a vanilla. Blasters gains a retire. Again, as long as that ability is around, MLB will still take the crown for top. So now we're going to talk about Spike Brothers. Spike Brothers is super strong, and don't get me wrong, it's consistent. It can get done when it needs to, so I think it's a good tier 2 deck. It doesn't miss much opportunities, and everything like that is, it has a great defensive line. You can set up turns where you can call things, but the problem with Spike Brothers is if you're not on General Siegfried, your deck isn't at a full potential. If you do not sit on him from the start of your grade 3 ride, you're at such a downturn that your opponent could push you harder. So until you get like Dudley Emperor, and then you have Dudley Emperor plus General Siegfried in the same deck, now you have like 6 optimal ride targets, maybe 7, where now it benefits you a lot better. So once that comes in, I definitely think it'll come into tier 1 play, but for right now it's sitting at, let's say, about here in tier 2. Next is Riser, Crit Riser. So again, you would imagine similar deck strategy, right? Similar make, similar model, but MLB just tool boxes its whole deck and support. So Risers is super strong. Don't get like it's really strong, and I don't want to offend people, but I think it's here. I think it belongs right next to its brother. And again, decks that can gain crits and restand ability is big in importance here. So that's where they're going to sit for right now. Next, we're going to talk about Shadow Paladins. Shadow Paladins, definitely out of the gate, is definitely a tier 1 deck. Being able to retire, having 2 Vanguards that can gain a crit, definitely puts in work for this deck. And can definitely be deadly in itself. And it can push damage outright. It's retiring effects, everything like that. I think this is how this will play out. Next, we definitely have the End. The End with Kagero's support is super strong, like it always has been, and I think it's one of the big 3 as well. It's still one of the big 3s because it's one of the few decks that counters MLB a little more consistently, especially having Blockade in your deck, Tejas to take out the Wingull if they have to search, everything like that. Just being able to have the answers, and having Tejas alone, the only deck that doesn't really care about their starter is pretty much Shadow Paladins, because their starter doesn't come out till later. So, but also having like their striker being able to gain a crit, and sometimes if you're at 2 damage, now you have the End, now you're dealing them 4 damage on their turn 2. So, I mean, very powerful, very strong deck. There's just so much more possibilities. So, next, I want to definitely talk about Dark Irregulars. Dark Irregulars is really good. It counters some of the meta, but it still has the issue against a lot of the other rank stuff. Like, it can handle itself if played properly. Most of these decks, if you know how to pilot it, you could counter most of the decks in the meta. But I definitely think it's a tier 3 deck. I think it sits right here. So with its power and benefits, it's very powerful, and it doesn't miss an opportunity shot. Amon, No Life King, being able to add the crit pressure with 5, it's ridiculously strong. But it will change its face around once the next set drops. Once we get that, he will definitely probably move up to tier 2, maybe closer to tier 1. Next time I do a tier list, when we do it for set, we're on set 5 right now? Set 5, yeah. Set 6, I'll definitely have an updated for that. So next, I want to talk about Coco. Coco, same reason for OTT, but instead of the stack, it relies on having no soul, and it can make or break the deck. So, but again, it also has access to Silent Tom. So with Tom, you could win very easily. Stands, everything like that. I think it's a great deck. But again, a lot of the newer decks kind of push it down, and a lot of the even older decks kind of keep pace with it. And again, it can handle the big 3, like most decks can, but I think it's high tier 3. Okay. If I can get it to tier 3, apparently it doesn't want it. Okay. We're going to just say high tier 3. Next, we have Blouse. Blouse is a really good deck. Like, to give the Blau God the answers, I would love to say S tier, but definitely with Blouse, it's a very powerful deck. It's definitely tier 3. So, but again, it can handle the tier 2s and everything like that, but once you start getting like the tier 1s and tier 3s, Blouse start getting hurt badly. It starts knocking out. Some of these decks just kind of can block Blouse out for days, even needing to. And that's with me playing it. Next, we have DP Police, Dimension Police. So, arguably, it's really strong. I would love to say that. But, again, with getting a crit and everything like that, it can cheese you wins. But to have your Vanguard restand and everything like that, it just doesn't do enough for it to justify it to be above like tier 3. Like, I love playing the deck, but there's so much it needs for the deck to be better. and it will get the support it needs in 2 sets. But now we're going to talk about Bermuda, one of my favorite clans in the world. But right now, it is on the low end, to be honest with you. There's not a lot of strength in its deck right now. It's too clunky. It's so much needs love and TLC. It needs its own signature. Being able to bounce cards back in the old days, because you could grab cards, grab things you need, but being able to bounce back a PG you put down is the extent you're going to really gain for benefit with Bermuda at the moment, so there's no point in that. So again, it can win games, don't get me wrong. As long as the stars align, a deck could win a game. But it has a habit of bricking too much where it's only good. So for right now, Bermuda is there. Next is Pelennor Iselle. So definitely kind of right next to Iselle, to be honest with you, because they both do something similar and they both can win on their own ways. Both of them are superior riders, but Pelennor, you try to focus more on placing Pelennor on when your opponent's at grade 2 to have the extra crit and swing in for the extra damage. But again, if you face people that know what you're doing, they'll get rid of the grade 0 that you have to get rid of that, and then you have Iselle as the backup. So that's where it comes in. Like, they both do the same thing, just slightly different. So one wants to focus on getting Iselle as soon as possible. The other one wants to try to get Pelennor first on your opponent's grade 2 turn, and then swapping into Iselle the rest of the game. So this is my tier list. Please leave a comment down below. Be nice to me, because this is just me playtesting the decks, and this is how I feel. Because unlike what I think most players have done, is I've had experience playing these decks. I've clocked in hours and hours with decks just so I have memorization and knowing combo A, combo B. So I do hope you guys enjoyed this, and please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.